Okay guys, we got more with the Chevy Blazer. Turned out to be a good one. Lots of nice stuff covered that was able to capture. It came back to our shop this time. Now at least it's running and it's still misfiring, so I was able to kind of go through it. Found some interesting stuff. Definitely not what I was expecting. You know, these 4.3s, Spider comes to mind. That's what I was expecting, and it wasn't that. When I looked at it, it was running really rich. Fuel trims were pegged rich. Well, at least I think it had a -30 or so total fuel trim, both banks. So, you know, running that poorly, all very similar symptoms to what a bad Spider unit will do on these. So, you know what, I just ordered one up and that was the plan. I was going to put one of those in, but I figured before I do that, let's go through the full diagnosis. Don't let our assumptions cloud our judgment. Just go through the diagnosis, follow the steps, and you know what, that led us to some pretty interesting conclusions, and I was able to cover a lot in this video, a lot of interesting stuff. So hope you guys tag along. And if you didn't catch the first one where I indexed the distributor with the lab scope, actually worked out quite well. I'll put a little box up there and let's carry on with the video. Okay, so we do have misfire monitors or counters, so we can look at that to see if do we have a individual cylinder kind of issue, or is it multiple cylinders. So of course all our currents are 0 because it's not running, but sometimes you can take a peek at history and it does show a lot on cylinder 4, a few on cylinder 2, and some on cylinder 6. Some of these older guys, it's not too uncommon to have one cylinder be a misfire, then say the adjacent cylinders register misfires as well. I don't believe my buddy cleared these or cleared the codes or any of that sort of stuff, so these could be sitting there for a while. Who knows, maybe maybe that bad cylinder 4 count was partially solved via tune-up. We don't really know, but let's run it and let's see if we get any current counts. I'm just gonna select just these. Okay, we'll run it. See if I can't keep this thing running. Actually, what I want to do, keep that. Okay, so we are actively counting cylinder 4. That's a dead miss, and cylinder 2 is misfiring pretty good as well. Not so much on 6, but that's what we're dealing with. Cylinder 4 is appearing to be a dead miss. So before, shut that off. Okay, so we want to shut it off. This was the first time running this morning. We did see that cylinder 4 was a dead miss, was counting as a dead miss. Cylinder 2 was just about a dead miss as well, but not quite as bad, and a few on cylinder 6. So definitely a bank 2 issue. So a tune-up was done on this. It wasn't me that did the tune-up. Not to say that I'm infallible. I mean, heck, I screw that stuff up all the time. But you know, before we go crazy, what's to say one of those spark plugs, you know, anywhere along its life, you know, in the parts factory, wherever, distribution center, what's to say one of those couldn't have been dropped? You know, it could have a crack, could. Maybe the wire's not in all the way. Before this engine gets hot, now is the time to go through and do those checks, paying particular attention to cylinder 4, making sure. I did go through afterwards and I did ensure that the wiring is routed properly. I have no issues at all with that. They didn't change the wires, just the spark plugs and a new mass airflow sensor and the whole distributor. I don't know if really anything else was done, but the wires normally, you know, my experience has been that if you have a wire issue, Usually you don't have a wire issue too badly at idle. Sometimes you do, but you hear the snapping. My guts tell me it's probably not a wire, but I want to go through and I want to make sure, you know, the basics. I want to check the plug, pull it out, check it, check that the wire is positively snapped on, all that sort of stuff before it gets too hot. And then once we're done with that, we'll continue on with this guy. You know, sometimes I look at the you know, field trims and stuff like that. You know, spoiler, when I checked it last night, the field trims were just pegged rich. You know, their total field trim was like -40 or so, like -30 on the short term, both banks, -10 or so on the long term. Bank 1, bank 2 about the same. So yeah, of course we, based off experience and this and that and the other thing, of course we said, yeah, let's get a spider. Pretty sure we're going that route, but since we do see an issue for number 4, we'll address the physicals, we'll address the spark plug, we'll address the wire fitment and all that stuff. Maybe I'll throw my Picoscope, the pressure transducer in there, kind of look to see what that looks like. But before we go crazy with anything else, let's just go straight after number 4 and see what we see. Okay, so I'll show you what I do when I'm checking cylinder layout. I just Google it. 2002 Chevy 4.3 firing order. Especially stuff like this, these domestics, they're so common. You get the pictures right away. And you look to see, make sure that nothing looks goofy. And sure enough, they all look about right. So if we look at this one here, the left, we see 246 is on the passenger side, 135 is on the driver's side. And then if we look at the distributor, we see 246, that same ordering, and then on the other side, on the driver's side, is 315. I have double checked that the wires are on properly. At least the numbering is on proper. So which we kind of would have to suspect anyways. Now number 2 was counting up pretty good too, but didn't seem to be counting as fast as number 4. So whereas if you had wires crossed completely, then you'd have 2, there would be a dead miss. All right, then also for under hood lights, it's kind of funny, you know, I've been here for 4 years now, I think, at this shop. And he's had this ragged old snap-on fluorescent underhood light that's, you know, well used, beat up, lots of electrical tape. The thing doesn't stay in position very well, and it is corded. You know, you plug it in. We have 2 of these Schumacher battery-powered guys. I quite like them. The lights on them, they're a gimbal, so you can, you know, switch them all around. They're LED. They actually last pretty long. You can set it from 1 to 2 to 3 lights, all that sort of business. And we have 2 of them, so we just, you know, if one runs out, you just bring it over, plug it in, grab the other one, that sort of deal as backup. Quite inexpensive too. I can't remember how much paid for them, but I think it was only 100 and small change. Might have even been 150. However, they are battery powered. One of them for sure, I can't remember which one it is, doesn't seem to hold the charge that well anymore. And you know what? You put it underneath, then you get pulled off. You come back to it and you forget that it's on. Or you say you're doing something like a transmission or anything that up, down, up, down, up, down. So you do all your underhood work, then you raise the vehicle, you start working underneath it, and you forget that, oh crap, I left that thing on. And you know, say, what if you're pulling a transmission, you got a screw stand under there, not so easy to bring it down. So this guy here, I never bothered hooking it up before because, you know, it's beat up, it's old, but you know what, the light's actually pretty good. It's corded. I don't have to worry about that thing running out. I could just leave that on all day. I can't believe I've never tried it before. It's funny, even my my snap-on rep was talking about it being a really good one and all that, but you know, sometimes he just, if it says snap-on, then of course it has to be good. But anyways, yeah, no, I'm quite happy with it. I can't believe I didn't try it before, and I'm going to continue trying it. I'm just going to find a better way of securing that to kind of help lock it where you want it to be. But anyways, number 4 is on the passenger side in the middle. Let's, how much battery? I can't believe I didn't charge my other battery. We might be running into an issue with that. So that would be, so in between, so this one would be 2. I don't know if you can see that well. Then number 4 would be here, and number 6 is at the back. So I'll see if I can't get you a little closer. Oh, yeah, this guy. I thought I'd be prepared to take out the battery for that last night, charge it, because I figured, you know, now would be the time when that would be dead. But you got to put the battery back in. Yeah. Well, let's try this again. Maybe I can get some better light down there. Yeah. I don't know. Let's see if we can get Chevy down there. You'll get a first look at it. Let me know if you see anything. I don't know. Can I get you much closer than that? Are you getting sick yet? We don't know. Alright, I'll bring you back up. So how was that? Did we learn anything? I don't know. Oh my. Well, you know what? I don't think this is working. I'm gonna let you down. I'm gonna pull it off. I'm gonna pull out the plug, and then I'll show you if I find anything, or I'll show you what I find. Okay, so I got the spark plug out, and I'm sure as you can see, I got a few other things hooked up. Like an idiot, I forgot to charge the other camera battery. So when I got here and I saw that this one was kind of low, I went to put the other one in, and then I found out that one was dead too. So this gave a chance to charge things up. I was going to do some testing anyway, so I figured I'd just, you know, while everything's charging, just hook all this sort of stuff up anyways. But the spark plug, I didn't show it's on camera, but the wire was on there nice and tight. There was nothing on the other end of it, like it looked clean, there was no corrosion, none of that sort of stuff. It was positively snapped on the plug, and I did triple check that the wire is properly routed on both ends. So we can ignore that for now. You know, obviously the wire itself could be bad, but I don't hear any snapping. You usually hear snapping. So we'll keep on going. The spark plug, I don't know how well you'll be able to see that. I'll try and get you a good shot. Is very black. Now, this hasn't been run very long on these plugs. And this is in line with what the scanner was saying when I checked it before, that it was super rich. One of the other things too I'll do when I have a misfire that's attributed to mainly just one cylinder, and you know, I put fresh spark plugs in there and it doesn't change anything, I will pay particular attention to the spark plug. You know, I don't know, this could have been dropped at some point. I didn't put it in, or even if I did put it in, you know, they're not always easiest to get access to. Sometimes if you go a little crazy on your angle, you can tweak it with your ratchet, and before you know it, you got a crack and you might not realize it. So I don't just physically look at the porcelain, I'll run my fingernail along it, and I don't see any cracks, I don't feel any cracks, I don't feel anything out of the ordinary, not that I was expecting it. So I don't believe this is the issue. Now, one of the things that we could do is we could put this in another cylinder and see if the misfire follows that cylinder. We're kind of getting misfires on all of bank 2, mostly on cylinder 4, so we'd have to swap it over to bank 1. Bank 1's not as nice to get to right now, and I don't really suspect it's just a spark plug, so I'm not going to go that route. I'm just going to carry on. I am suspecting fuel related. However, I am going, at this point, I'm going to do some testing. I hooked up some equipment. Some people, some bosses that I've had to, would view this as a bit overboard, but I have the equipment. I'm used to hooking it up. I'm used to looking at it. This doesn't really take me that long to hook up. So on channel 1, I've got the pressure transducer in there, the Picoscope WPS 500X in cylinder 4. I'll check to see a pressure waveform of that. On channel 2, I've got the first look pulse sensor into a centralized location. On this particular one, I got it going into the brake booster hose. On channel 3 is I got a high amp clamp around, on this case I got it around battery positive. It's a little easier to get to. Doesn't matter whether you go positive or negative, just as long as you get everything, or particularly the starter current, because I'm going to be doing a relative compression test. And since I have the plug out, and this is a distributor, we want to give that spark somewhere to go for that wire, the cylinder 4 wire. So I have just a spark plug tester plugged into it, and then of course I give that somewhere to go. And then since I have that there, you know, I've got a secondary pickup lead around that wire anyways. You know, since on distributors, if you go around the wire, you're not going to see the nice secondary pattern. You pretty much just see the giant firing line, but that's okay. We're just kind of looking to see something for a sync. We don't know if we need that, but might as well have it. When I do this sort of thing to give that spark somewhere to go, on these particular plug wires, the wires snap onto here. So they'll snap onto that tester nicely, so that's fine. If you have a coil that has a spring and it's meant to be held down with a bolt, then obviously you're not just going to be able to have this hanging out in there. Then what I'll do in that case, to give it somewhere to go, is I'll put some electrical tape around it just to keep it from falling out. You want it somewhere to go. Also, when you're doing this sort of stuff, of course you want to tie things up. You want to keep any of the wires away from anything that's rotating or hot. As well, you know, I'll have that secondary spark just shooting out of my tester there. So I want to keep that away from my equipment. You know, the pressure transducer, I did spend a lot of money on it, but more importantly than that, because you know, I don't really think it's that sensitive. Sure, if you have that, you know, 10,000 or, well, that's probably going to be 3,000 volts, but either way, if you got, you know, thousands of volts jumping directly into that transducer, yeah, you're going to cook things. But you know, when you got a bit of a distance from it, I don't think it's that sensitive. However, it does create interference, particularly also with the amp clamp. So I try to keep it up out of the way as much as possible. It's good for the health of everything else, but also you don't want the interference. So hooking all this stuff up doesn't really take that much time. Now, what I'm going to do is I'll be able to do a relative compression test. So I'll be able to see through the starter current, I'll be able to see relative compression. Also, when you're starting, that's kind of when you're able to get a good look at the intake pulses. Make sure they're all even. You know, once it's running, that tends to get pretty noisy, depending on the design of the intake manifold where you're into. And then the pressure transducer will be in there to see a nice cranking peak pressure waveform. Also be able to get, with the secondary pickup, we'll be able to get spark timing. And then once that's done, once I have a cranking capture, then I'll be able to do a running capture. Of course, the amp clamp won't be useful at that point, but usually I just leave it in there anyways, just turn off the channel. So hooking this sort of stuff up doesn't take very long. Am I suspecting to see anything? Not necessarily, but you know, if we have a massive compression issue, then I will see it then. Of course, I am suspecting a spider issue. I am suspecting overfueling. So I do suspect that that compression will be lower. I did do a clear flood mode crank, and I kind of heard a little bit of uneven cranking, but I was expecting that. But when I hooked up before, when I was checking the distributor to index it properly, you know, I had the pressure transducer in cylinder 1, and of course you save that stuff because you never know when you'll need it. And this is why I do this. I'm just checking to see, you know what, I could have just thrown that pressure transducer in there and boom, that's all I would have needed, just to see kind of peak pressure. You know, I could have used a gauge, all that sort of stuff. But I have this, it doesn't take that much longer. What if down the way, what if, you know, I go this, the spider route, what if that turns out not to be the issue? Or what if I do further testing on that and that turns out not to be the issue? You know, the vehicle leaves, say it seems okay, and then a day or two later it comes back and it's really not okay. Well, by doing this, I can save this, and in these waveforms with these multiple sensors, there's a lot of information. You know, I can check cranking pressures, I can check the vacuum poles on all the cylinders, I can check the relative compressions of all the cylinders, I can check the spark timing of this one. You know, I've already got a spark timing of number 1. I've already got cranking and running pressure waveforms of number 1 that it's saved before. So now I'll be able to compare number 4 to number 1. Number 1's not registering any misfires, all these sorts of things. So by doing this and by saving this, yes, it might seem initially like overkill, but you know what, when you got someone come back, you don't even need, or maybe all they do is phone, and you know that, okay, the boss comes up to you and tells you that, hey, there's an issue. Well, you don't even need the vehicle there. You can spend the 10 minutes or so, look through your captures, and you might find the issue there. A little bit long-winded, but anyways, this is why I do this. It doesn't take very long. It's better to have it, not need it, than have a customer come back and you're just scratching your head. So we don't suspect a spark plug. I got Picoscope hooked up. Let me grab some captures and we'll start with the cranking, then we'll do the running. We'll just grab all that and then we'll go through it, just a brief go through, and then we'll move on to what I suspect the issue is.
Well, it looks like, let's see if we can't set this up a little bit better without the glare. It almost looks like I might be able to get out of doing a spider. I don't particularly enjoy doing them, so I wouldn't totally be complaining, but this green is our relative compression test. All I did was crank. I was going to do kind of both and talk about both, but we do see the slant. There's a hump missing, and if we see this big line here, that's where number 4 sparks. So yeah, that's number 4. If we look over on this one here, there's also number 4. This has a small line because, again, you don't get a good pattern when you're on the plug wire, especially near the end. But it's enough to show that, yes, this is number 4, this is number 4. We are looking for repetition. We do see repetition. I thought for a second there that I didn't hook up or didn't turn on the pressure transducer because it stayed right at the bottom. I was charging that as well because that was pretty low on battery, but it was plugged in, it was turned on, and you can see the little hump. It's reporting it's not seeing anything. So this is why I like to grab sorry about that. This is why I like to grab a bunch of stuff. It really takes, if you're going to do this anyways, it takes so little time to hook up an intake pulse waveform if you have it. So might as well. Let's hook up some cursors. We'll see if we can't kind of get some more useful stuff out of here. So I'm just going to go, you know, this is not perfectly accurate because I don't know. It's doubtful. It's doubtful between 2 revolutions of the crank or 1 revolution of the cam, it's doubtful that the computer tried to change the ignition timing much during a crank. So, but it could have, right? Ideally, it's better to hook these up to actual pressure pulses on, you know, an in cylinder. But you know what, this is what we got. It'll still give us a pretty good indication of who is who. So let's put some partitions in there. So this is a rough idea of when each cylinder should be firing. So this is number 4. You know what, I probably still have this back up. Let's click on this one. So it says 165432. We get in on that. 165432. Okay, so we'll go back to here. So 165432 1654. So we can see, you know, there's a whole bunch. So oh, I wish I could put labels in here. I don't think I can. So 432 165432. So it's every second one. So 432 16. So this is 6. This is 2, and this is 4. So 2 looks to be a little bit better. So you know, these intake pulses, you want them all to be even, and you can tell they're not. So it's definitely got breathing issues. Can we necessarily discern that's an entire bank? Can we necessarily discern anything necessarily about the other cylinders? If we look at the relative compression, the other cylinders all look pretty even. So it's just, of course, this missing one here. However, what if, again, because we were going down that route of a bad spider, you know what, if you got a completely washed out cylinder, you can get no compression. So you don't want to call an engine when maybe it is still just a spider. So what we'll do is we'll see if we can bring that back to life. Maybe I'll pull out the Picoscope pressure transducer. I can throw a borescope in there. I can see if there's anything obvious, any obvious issues. I can see if maybe I'll throw a leak down tester in there to see if it's going out anywhere else. You know, if it's going out a valve, then that ain't cylinder wash. If all of the leak down is going out past the piston rings, then that might be cylinder wash. I did pull the dipstick, and there's engine oil on there, and the oil did smell a bit like fuel, but you know what, that's to be expected. And the oil was still in a decent range, but you know what, that's also to be expected. If you have a fuel injector dumping fuel, you don't always expect to see your engine oil level to be way high, because what happens is once you get fuel dilution, then your engine oil gets a lower viscosity and it just gets burned off. So yes, you will be increasing the volume of fluid in your crankcase, but it gets burned off relatively quickly. So you don't always expect to see the level to be really high. So I think that's what we will do, because nothing on here immediately jumps out, just other than the fact that, hey, we got issues. So let's see if we can get some life back in there, or let's see if we see anything blatantly obvious. I don't know if there's a valve issue or whatever. If we don't see anything like that, if it all goes out the crankcase or past the piston rings on the leak down test, then we'll see if we can dry out that cylinder. We'll see if we can dump a whole bunch of oil down there. We'll try a bunch of things to see if we can't bring this back to life, or if it actually is a severe loss of compression.
Okay, so I just went through with the video scope, and I didn't see anything glaringly obvious. Nothing. There's no holes. You know, the valves were intact. No blown out valve seat. All this sort of stuff. You typically speaking, if you have something that is complete loss of compression, if you have a mechanical issue that's complete loss of compression, like zero, if it's a valve issue, you're gonna see something. I didn't see anything glaringly obvious. Looking at the camera now when I moved it, I don't know if I actually hit the record button. So maybe you didn't get a chance to see any of this. If I did actually record that, I don't know how much it's going to be that useful anyways, because these things here, it's not like what you see in the movies. It's not Mission Impossible. Trying to get these to actually position where you want, it's freaking hard. You can see something on the corner, a little spot of the piston, and you try to move this thing and you think, okay, I just need to move a little bit to the left. Think you can do it? No. But anyways, didn't see anything that jumped out. There's no broken pieces of whatever in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a leak down test. This will help out with a couple things. In order for this engine really to have any hope, at least insofar as what the customer's going to be willing to do, is all of that has to be leaking past the rings. If the leak down test shows it's leaking anywhere else, then that's it for this thing. The customer's not willing to put that much money into it. If it is just purely leaking past the rings, then it might only be cylinder wash. So the thing that's also nice about the leak down test, will be blowing air into there, which will help it dry out if it is just leak down. So I will hook that up and I will show you my method of what I do for a leak down test. Okay, so we're going to do a leak down test on this vehicle. I haven't used the leak down tester in a while, so one of the things you always want to do with these kind of hoses, it's an O-ring, just like any other O-ring. You're rotating it against something metal. Put a little bit of lube on there. It'll go a long ways. Take care of your tools. So we'll thread this in the hole. Spark plug's removed, of course. Then we'll hook up our leak down tester. Now, I don't really do leak down as much anymore. Never really did it that much. I just have this basic tester. I've been meaning to kind of get the better one that has 2 gauges. If you have 2 gauges on it, then you'll have the first gauge will tell you how much air pressure you're letting into the cylinder. This one just has the actual leak down gauge. Sometimes it'd be nice to know how much pressure you're putting in there. Then you can at least, when you set your regulator, you can do it so that every single one is the same pressure, and you can kind of be more consistent to get a more of a feel for it. Maybe I'll get one, but you know, one of those, I'm probably looking 150, 200 bucks. You know, is it worth it? Justify it? The expense? Yada yada yada. These here, I always back off the regulator. That way, when I admit the air to it, it's not the full blast shop air. You kind of let it on gradually. You do need to let in a fair amount of air. If you only let in a little bit of air, of course, that's going to overcome the gap in the past the rings. So you got to let in enough air that it allows the rings to actually seal. And then if you look up how to do a leak down test, what it'll tell you to do is it'll tell you to rotate the crankshaft so that cylinder is at top dead center compression. Do you need it to be at top dead center compression? No, you don't. All you need is the valves to be closed. Well, how do you know how the valves are closed?
Okay, so I'll give you a quick rundown of what I do when I'm doing a leak down test. Because I don't worry about top dead center, all I worry about is finding a spot where both the valves are closed. And I'll show you with this pressure transducer waveform. I'll show you how I do that. If you're not familiar with the pressure transducer waveform, then basically all it is just a sensor that goes in place at the spark plug, and it graphs pressure over time. So if you look right over here on the left, you know, this is a spot where both the valves are closed, the piston's coming up, we got pressure rise, we got our compression, then the piston comes down, our pressure decreases. This line right here is at 0, so it's atmospheric. It'll go into a slight vacuum, and then right around here, the exhaust valve opens, the piston's still coming down, but the exhaust is atmospheric, so the pressure rises. You get your kind of plateau here while the exhaust valve is open. For this section right here, the piston is starting to come up again for top dead center exhaust, but our exhaust valve is open the whole way, so we get roughly atmospheric. Then right around top dead center exhaust, our exhaust valve closes, the intake valve opens, and right when the piston's coming down, so we go into a bit of a vacuum. So the piston's coming down, 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 down until bottom dead center, and the intake valve is still open, so we're still at vacuum. Piston starts coming up, but pressure only starts to rise roughly around here, which is roughly around where the intake valve closes, and piston's coming up and pressure builds again. So that's a quick rundown. We got the 180 degree markers here. So this one right here is top dead center compression. This one here is bottom dead center after the power stroke. This one here is top dead center exhaust. And this one here is bottom dead center 540 or during the intake stroke. And then top dead center exhaust again. So if we grab some extra cursors here, so right around here is where the exhaust valve opens. Exhaust valve will close right around the 360 mark. And if we look at total duration, it's, you know, 210 or so, just over 180. And this is of crankshaft rotation, by the way. So the intake valve closes somewhere around here. And if you look at that, you know what, maybe it's a little further. It'll be kind of close. So you know what, that's roughly around 210 degrees as well. So what that means is both of the durations of intake and exhaust are just a little more than 180 degrees. Well, 180 degrees is half of a crankshaft rotation. So if you're into intake, if you're in the intake cycle, over here, then all you have to do is a half turn of the crank plus a little bit, and then you'll get outside of the intake. If you're in the exhaust, you do a half turn plus a little bit, you'll get into the intake. Do another half turn plus a little bit, you'll get out of the intake. Now, the other thing too that we can pay attention to, this is our buffer. So this cursor right here is roughly right around where the intake valve closes. This cursor, we'll move this one over here to where the exhaust valve opens for the next cycle, and we see 300 degrees. So that's kind of 3/4 of a turn of a crankshaft is the duration of time where no valves are open, which means it's well over a half turn. It's almost a full turn. So the majority of the space, both the valves are closed. That means that we have a lot of buffer. So what I do, when I got this guy in there, you know what, I will go back to the exhaust. I'll be kind of paying attention to the exhaust, and I'll be spinning the crankshaft by hand until I start hearing noise coming out of the exhaust. And then I'll spin it 180 plus some, then I should start hearing it come out of the intake. Then I'll spin another 180 plus some to get out of the intake, and I'll spin about almost another full half turn, a little bit less. Then I know I'm well within the period over here where there's no valves open. So what happens if our exhaust valve is stuck open the whole way through? Then you know what, we won't know when the exhaust stroke is starting using this method. So then we listen for the intake. You know what, if you rotate, you know, 2 full turns and you hear exhaust noise the whole way, well, you know that that's a problem. But say you want to find out if there's anything else wrong, then you need to start paying attention to intake. So you keep turning until you start hearing you know, to start with, no noise coming out of the intake. And then as you get to right around here, all of a sudden you start hearing a little more noise. And then you start hearing it just whistling out of the intake. Then you know you're in the intake stroke. Do a half turn to get out of the intake stroke, and do another almost half turn to get well within this period here. And then you know you're in a spot where both valves should be closed. Now, theoretically, it's possible that both the intake valves and the exhaust valves could be stuck open, in which case this method won't work, but less likely for that to be the case. But anyways, hopefully that makes sense. You know what, I just do, because since I have this in there anyways, since I have the intake hose off and I'll be paying attention to the exhaust anyways, you know what, I just keep rotating it over. I should hear exhaust noises, then I should hear that go away as I start hearing intake increase, and then I should hear intake go away, and then I do roughly another half turn, and I know I'm in a good spot where both the valves should be closed. And that's how I do my leak down tests. I find it's a lot easier than trying to make sure I'm on top dead center compression, because I like to just keep on moving. I don't like to spend needless time on things. Anyways, hopefully all that makes sense, and I will go back to the video. Okay, so we got our leak down tester hooked up. It's in the cylinder. We got air hooked up. I always keep the regulator off so we don't hear anything, all that business. I am suspecting this is on exhaust right now, or the start of exhaust. I did rotate it over looking at something else, and I saw one of the valves open and it was pretty clean, so I suspected that's exhaust. So I suspect we will hear it coming out of the exhaust, but we will open up, if I can get my hand in there. Come on. This way, right? Okay, so we can hear it start to hiss. Now right now, it's letting so little air in there that it's easily going past the rings. Our exhaust, I suspect the exhaust valve's the one that's being the issue. Okay, so let me go to the back and see if we hear it out of the exhaust. Actually, I should probably open some other things, but we'll open this guy. Come on. I could have been a little more prepared, but you know, that just wouldn't be right, would it? Oh my God. Well, our leak down tester is hooked up. The compressor might be going a lot. I'm sorry about that. It's pretty close to where I'm at. It might be difficult for me to do anything about that. I'm suspecting that the engine's on exhaust right now. So let me go to the back and see if I hear it out of the tailpipe. Just have to forgive the compressor noise. It'll probably kick on and off a couple times during this. Where are you? Oh, I know it's annoying. Oh, I hope you have a tailpipe. Oh, you do. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, stinks. I don't know if you can hear that. I can hear that. So it's definitely on the exhaust. Let's go back over here. So I will, well, you know what? Let me open this too. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate it over, the engine over. It should get to be a point where it no longer makes noise out of the exhaust. It should start making noise out of the intake. And then I'll keep going. But let me open this as well. Maybe I can do it. I hate these caps. At no point should it be making noise out of there. And then we'll pull that guy out too. Smell that. Does that smell like fuel? I think so. Huh. So the other thing I use, stethoscopes. I keep two of them. One for the actual metal rod, the other one I just keep it down as a hose, and this can narrow down sounds. So just for the heck of it right now, I'm going to check to see if I hear any noise out of that rad or any noise out of the dipstick. I don't think I should hear much out of the dipstick because it's coming out of the it should be easier to come out of the exhaust. Okay. It would be awfully nice if that was moved, but that's okay. I'll start rotating it and wait until I can hear it out of there. Wait, I got you propped up there. I don't know if that'll work or not, but I'm gonna go down underneath because I don't think I can do it from up top. And just as soon as I find my ratchet, I think it's still, I swear it was organized at one point. So I'm gonna go underneath. I'm gonna rotate the engine over. It should start coming out of that intake pretty soon. You should hear it pretty good. Get my stuff together. Right. Start rotating. Make sure you rotate in the direction of the engine. Oh. Okay, so I actually turned that a lot more than 90 degrees. I turned that 150, 160 or so. So shouldn't hear anything coming out of the exhaust. I'm just gonna run back there and see if I hear anything. Well, I still hear a fair amount of the exhaust. Okay, so getting mixed up because I'm trying to do too much. Don't forget, when we're doing this, we're doing a full rotation of the camshaft, so 2 rotations of the crankshaft. So each cycle is 180 degrees of crankshaft. That's why I still actually hear it much more of the exhaust now than I did before, because I only turned it 150, 160, and I need to turn it probably, I don't know, 200 or so degrees to be 100% sure of crankshaft. So I will continue turning. I'll also mark the crankshaft so I know, kind of, I'm not purely guessing. I believe we're just starting to go into the intake stroke. We're probably just about a bit of overlap. So I will continue rotating. Okay, it should be just about the end of the exhaust. So I'm going to start turning it. Should start hearing it coming out of the intake soon. Yeah. Okay, so I turned it about a full 360 of the crank. So that means we should be well into the intake. Hopefully that's not too annoying. I might have to edit out some of that sound.
But yeah, we shouldn't hear any exhaust, and since the intake's wide open, we shouldn't hear any noise coming out of anything else. So let me run back and check that. Okay, so I do hear a whole bunch of noise coming out of the exhaust. It's far enough that exhaust valve should be closed. However, if everything's blasting into that intake, possible it could be filling up the intake, and some other cylinder might have a bit of overlap, might have an intake valve open at the same time as an exhaust valve. So that might be why we're hearing a bit out of the exhaust, or maybe that's our problem. But what I'll continue doing is I'll continue rotating, and we'll get out of the intake stage. So we should be, I don't know, a third to 2/3 of the way through the intake stage. So I'll continue rotating it, maybe another 90 degrees, 180 degrees at least. Probably, 200, 220 degrees, at least another half turn plus of the crankshaft. We should start getting fully out of intake. Okay, so what do we hear? I am well past the intake stroke. So past the intake, you got piston goes up for compression, and then piston has to come all the way down to almost near the bottom of bottom dead center before any other valves open. So you got a big range, almost a full rotation of the crankshaft where no valve should be open. So I went way past the intake. So we're clearly at a spot right now. Everything should be closed. I definitely should not hear anything out of the intake. I do suspect from the noise of that. Has that changed any? Not really, it still says hi. So all that should be coming out of, that should all be coming out of the dipstick hole right now, because the valve should be closed. But let's listen. Maybe hear a touch out of that. Not as much out of that as I expect. Nothing really out of the coolant. Okay, so let's think about this for a bit. Because we're at the point of condemning an engine. We have to think, you know what, let's shut this off. Alright, so we're at the point of condemning an engine. We have to think about any possible variables. I still hear and feel air coming out of the exhaust. I feel it pretty good. Shouldn't have air coming out of the exhaust after the intake, right? Intake, gobbles air, 180 degrees or so, actually more than that, but we'll just go with nice even intervals of 4. 180 degrees of crank is your intake stroke. Then it has to compress that, so you have 180 degrees of compression. Then it has a power stroke. Then you have 180 degrees of the power. So then you have 180 degrees of exhaust. So in these perfect even numbers, which of course is not, after the intake, you should have a full 360 degrees of crank before that exhaust valve opens. So the entire way through, I heard noise of the exhaust. You shouldn't. The only way you could be hearing noise of the exhaust is if the rings are so bad that this is putting so much pressure in the crankcase that is then back feeding another cylinder through its rings that happens to have an exhaust valve open. You know what, you'd hear it blasting out of the dipstick tube. I don't. At no point did I hear that blasting out of the dipstick tube. But you know what I did notice before when I was looking at the scan data, said it was running really rich. Well, exhaust gas will do that. What is exhaust gas? Exhaust gas is depleted air in the sense that there's no oxygen. So there's nothing in there to support combustion. So what does an oxygen sensor detect? Oxygen. If an exhaust valve is not closing, if it's staying open, I'm going to take a better look at that. If that exhaust valve is staying open, then exhaust gas is just rushing back in, which will be rushing back into the intake, can be feeding that whole bank, can also be starving the other side a little bit too, but you will get a super rich condition. So it's not looking good, but let me hook this back up and I will show you that we still hear a lot of noise out of that exhaust. I'll make sure, because I got the regulator open a lot, I'll make sure that the engine doesn't rotate. I don't think it will. Nope. Okay, so we should be during either the compression stroke or the first bit of the power stroke, but we should be well away from any point when that exhaust valve is open. I don't know if you can hear that. I can feel that. Let me put something over there. Hey, buddy. Put her there. Yeah, that shouldn't be inflated. Yep. That's bad. Okay, so where does that leave us? Well, our balloon animal and exhaust pretty much tells the whole story. We got a leaking exhaust valve that's staying open. But you know what? You're talking about a lot of money for a fix. You're not talking about $100, $200. You'd be well over $1,000, you know, maybe $2,000, depending on what the full story is. So you have to think: is there anything else we possibly could have overlooked? Well, one possibility is, what if you're turning the engine the wrong way? Most vehicles turn clockwise. Some actually turn counterclockwise. Pretty much all domestics turn clockwise, so you could look it up. But one of the things that I found with doing stuff like this, when you're thinking that a vehicle's problem is one thing, and then you actually find out it's, oh, holy crap, it's something totally different, way more expensive. And you're talking with the customer and you're kind of like, wow, you know, I wasn't really expecting this. Well, you know what? They're really not wanting to spend that kind of money on that kind of repair. They can catch on to the fact that you're not fully convinced, or not so much not convinced, but you're not coming across with the full confidence. They can latch on to that, and then once they get the feeling that you don't have full confidence and they don't want to spend that kind of money, before you know it, you feel like you're in some courtroom trying to proclaim your innocence, right? You're just trying to convince them that this is the issue. Before you know it, you're pulling the thing back in. You're kind of hooking all of this junk back up just because it is such an expensive repair. Or you lose the job, or. So whenever I'm in a situation like this, you know what? I got all this hooked up now. Spend the extra minute just to go the extra extreme mile. And what you can do is get a buddy back there, watch this sucker, rotate that engine to full 720. You see this lit whole way? That way when they're like, well, are you sure? What about this? What about this? What about this? Are you sure it really needs all that money? You can say, yes. It was lit, or it was filled up the entire way. No ifs, ands, buts. That's 100%. You got extra things you can say that you went the extreme. Doesn't really take that long now that we have it all hooked up. But to bring it back in, reset it up, yeah, that takes a bunch of time you don't want to spend. And then you're constantly fighting to get that confidence back. The other thing you can do too, if you don't want to do the full 720, or say you don't have another person help you out, just put it in the intake stroke. Put it well within the intake stroke, not at either end, but well within when you hear it just blasting out of the intake. If this thing is still lit out of that exhaust, if you still have enough air coming through the exhaust, even though that exhaust, the intake valve is wide open, then wow, that's pretty extreme. You don't have to worry about any of that sort of stuff. You don't have to worry about a really cautious customer. You say, yes, 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 I am $3,000 confident that this intake valve is the problem. Now, what's the reason for the intake valve? Or, sorry, the exhaust valve. What's the reason for the exhaust valve? Typically, valves don't just bend on their own. Nobody's been in there recently. Well, you know what? Speculation, maybe the spring broke, the valve spring. And then with that, you got some extra float. It's kind of coming down a little further. It hits the piston. It is really hard to get these suckers to go exactly where you want them to go when you're kind of going in a cylinder. You kind of turn it around. It's hard to orientate it. I did see a spot that kind of looked like it had contact on the piston. I couldn't get a really clear picture of it. So my suspicion is, you know, if you pull that valve cover, I would have to assume you're going to find a broken valve spring. But either way, there's no point in doing that because we know the exhaust valve is hooped. So I got some shots with this that did show the exhaust valve that was on an angle where it definitely is bent. I tried taking some pictures with this as well as I pulled out my phone, snapped a little video trying to get a better angle. Anytime I tried using my main camera to focus on this, just couldn't see anything. So I'll play that and hopefully that shows up.
Okay, this is exhaust valve. You can see that is open on that side at least. And we go back to the other side, and that's mostly closed. It's bent.
Well, you know what they say about hindsight. When I was making the video and I was looking at this while kind of doing everything else, the angles that I saw of this sure made that valve look bent. But now going through the editing, and when I posted the video of this that I took with my phone and really looked at it, it didn't really look bent. It just looked open. So again, you know, a valve spring that's broken, kind of like a suspension coil spring. You get a coil or two that breaks off, and now all of a sudden your spring might be this high to begin with, but now it's kind of this high. So it's not able to close the valve all the way, and the valve kind of sticks down below. These aren't normally interference fit engines, so it could be that valve's not bent. It could be that it's just not able to fully close. What difference does that make? Actually, a lot of difference. It's possible you could fix this car, or at least make it pretty well fixed, just by popping the valve cover off. They do make valve spring compressor tools that you don't have to pull the head for. You just kind of attach it around there, you wind down the gear on the top, it compresses the spring, get a little magnet, grab the keepers, try not to lose them. Then, you know, you can take the spring off, replace it with a new spring. Of course, while you're doing that, you want to get something like our handy dandy leak down tester again. Of course, make sure that both of the valves are closed. If you pump the cylinder up with air, that'll keep the valves closed. You know, you do need to rotate the engine so that the intake valve will be closed, obviously. Otherwise, what some people do is you can put in some rope or something, just feed it through the spark plug hole so that you don't want to drop that valve, is what I'm getting at. If you drop the valve, then yeah, you got no choice, you're pulling the head. But if you grab one of these tools, you pop off the keepers, you replace out the broken spring. It could be just as simple as putting in a new spring, put it all back, put the valve cover back, and away you go. Looking at this, didn't look as bent as I first thought. It's kind of harder to see at that one corner. So you know what? Yeah, I'm sure you do that and the vehicle is roadworthy, and that might only cost, just a few hours worth of labor instead of a lot. One of those things, when I go through with editing, I see a lot of stuff. I'm like, oh wow, I wish I noticed that the first time around. But anyways, that's where we're at. The customer took the vehicle, and I don't know what the conclusion of that was, if there was a conclusion. So anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hope you learned something along the way. I know I learned a lot on this one. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks again.